A powerful black businesswoman and owner of a prestigious hotel walks into her own establishment, disguised as an ordinary guest. She's met with cold stares, dismissive service, and blatant discrimination. No one recognizes her. No one treats her with respect, and when security is called to escort her out, she realizes something is deeply wrong in the very place she built with her own hands. Determined to uncover the truth, she digs deeper and discovers a shocking reality lurking beneath the surface. The grand doors of the Golden Orchid Hotel glided open as Naomi Carter stepped inside, her heart swelling with pride as she took in the breathtaking lobby. Towering marble columns framed the space, golden chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the scent of fresh-cut lilies lingered in the air. Everything about this place radiated luxury, elegance, and prestige, a sanctuary Naomi had built from the ground up, turning it into one of the most sought-after five-star hotels in the city. For years, she had poured her heart and soul into this business, ensuring every detail reflected her vision of excellence. But today, she wasn't here as the owner. Today, she was just another guest. Dressed in simple jeans, a plain white blouse, and comfortable sneakers, Naomi looked nothing like the polished business mogul who often graced the pages of hospitality magazines. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, no entourage, just a woman looking for a place to stay. And that was intentional. For a while now, she had been hearing whispers, small complaints from guests who felt they had been overlooked, ignored, or even disrespected by the staff. Most were brushed off as misunderstandings, isolated incidents. But Naomi wasn't the type to ignore a problem. She wanted to see for herself. She walked slowly toward the front desk, where a tall, clean-cut young man in a crisp navy uniform stood behind the marble counter. His name tag read Ethan Reynolds, and he was chatting idly with another employee, glancing up briefly as Naomi approached. But instead of offering his usual warm welcome, his eyes swept over her attire, lingering just a little too long. His expression shifted neutral at first, then something colder, something unreadable. "Excuse me," Naomi said, keeping her voice polite but firm. "I'd like to book a room for the night." Ethan barely concealed his disinterest. "We're fully booked," he said flatly, fingers tapping against the counter. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Really?" "I checked online just before I got here. There were rooms available." His jaw tightened. Online availability isn't always accurate. We have a certain standard of guests, and I don't think this is the right fit for you. Naomi's stomach clenched, but she kept her face neutral. A certain standard. There it was. The moment she had feared and half expected. "Not the right fit," she repeated, her voice laced with curiosity. "And why is that?" Ethan hesitated for half a second before recovering. "I just think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else," he said, his gaze flicking toward the door. A subtle, unspoken dismissal. Naomi could have ended it right then. She could have pulled out her phone, called Vanessa, her assistant, and had Ethan fired before the clock struck the next hour. But she didn't. Instead, she took a breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "I see," she murmured. "Then I suppose I'll check out the restaurant instead." She turned on her heel before he could respond, making her way toward the hotel's award-winning fine dining restaurant, the Orchid Room. The space was just as exquisite as the rest of the hotel: white tablecloths, polished silverware, servers gliding between tables with effortless grace. Naomi approached the hostess stand, where a young woman with sleek blonde hair and an air of quiet authority stood, scanning the seating chart. "Hi," Naomi said with a smile. "I'd like a table for one, please." The hostess barely glanced up. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, but I thought I could just." "We're fully booked," she cut in before Naomi could finish. Naomi arched an eyebrow, shifting her weight slightly. "Are you sure?" she asked, glancing into the dining room. At least 5 tables sat empty. "They're reserved," the hostess said quickly, voice clipped. Naomi leaned forward just a fraction. "You didn't even check the system," she pointed out, her tone still light, but there was a sharp edge beneath it now. The hostess hesitated, her gaze flicking toward Naomi's clothes before settling back on the seating chart. Still no apology, no reconsideration, just quiet dismissal. Naomi stepped back, nodding slowly as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in her mind. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a systemic attitude, one she had never seen firsthand because, as the owner, she had always been treated with respect. But how many others had walked through these doors and faced the same thinly veiled prejudice? Before she could decide what to do next, a movement caught her eye. A well-dressed couple, Caucasian, in designer outfits, strolled into the restaurant. The same hostess who had just turned Naomi away lit up with a welcoming smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" she asked, voice warm, eager. The woman shook her head. "No, but we were hoping to grab a quick dinner." "Of course. Right this way," the hostess beamed, grabbing two menus and leading them toward a pristine, candlelit table. Naomi felt the fire rise in her chest, but she stayed silent, watching. It wasn't about the rooms being full. It wasn't about reservations. It was about perception. About bias. About who, in the eyes of these employees, belonged here and who didn't. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Vanessa. "Everything running smoothly at the hotel." Naomi smirked bitterly as she typed back a quick reply. "I wish. We have a problem." But she wasn't leaving. Not yet. She had spent years building this place, crafting its reputation, ensuring it was one of the finest hotels in the country. And now she had to face the truth. Beneath the gilded luxury, beneath the immaculate service, something was deeply wrong. So instead of walking out, Naomi turned, heading toward the elevator that led to the upper floors. If this was how the staff treated her at first glance, she needed to know how deep this problem ran. But before she could reach the elevator, a shadow loomed in her peripheral vision. She turned to see Ethan, the front desk clerk, approaching this time with two uniformed security guards beside him. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice louder than necessary, drawing attention from the other guests. "We need to ask you to leave." Naomi stared at him, momentarily stunned. "Excuse me." "This is private property," Ethan said smoothly, arms crossed, "and we have the right to refuse service to anyone." Security guards. They were treating her like a trespasser, like a problem that needed to be escorted out of the building. And in that moment, Naomi knew this wasn't just about bad employees. This wasn't just a few people having a bad day. This was a culture, a system, a rot that had festered beneath the surface of her hotel, unnoticed, unchecked. But instead of snapping, instead of revealing who she really was, Naomi did something surprising. She took a step back, smiled, and said, "All right, I'll leave." But as she walked toward the exit, her mind was already racing. She knew exactly what she was going to do next. It wasn't what anyone expected. As Naomi Carter stepped out of the Golden Orchid Hotel, she felt the cool evening air hit her face, a stark contrast to the burning frustration in her chest. The grand golden-lit entrance behind her gleamed under the city lights, its polished facade exuding exclusivity and prestige, but now she knew the truth. Beneath the shimmering chandeliers and immaculate service, something was deeply, disturbingly wrong. And tonight, she had seen it firsthand. The security guards who had escorted her out lingered near the door, their presence a silent reinforcement of the unspoken message: she wasn't welcome. Naomi didn't look back. She walked calmly to the curb, pulling out her phone. A black sedan idled nearby, her driver, Malcolm, waiting as he always did when she visited the hotel. But tonight she wasn't getting in. Instead, she dialed Vanessa. "Naomi," came Vanessa Brooks' voice, brisk and alert. "I saw your message. What happened?" Naomi exhaled sharply. "I was just thrown out of my own damn hotel." There was a stunned silence on the other end before Vanessa hissed, "What?" "I walked in dressed like a regular guest, asked for a room, got refused. Tried the restaurant, same thing. And when I didn't leave fast enough, they called security," Naomi said, her voice tight, laced with barely contained anger. "They didn't recognize me, Vanessa. They just saw a black woman in plain clothes and decided I didn't belong." Vanessa cursed under her breath. "Tell me who." "Ethan Reynolds at the front desk, some hostess at the restaurant, and two security guys," Naomi replied. "But this isn't just about them. It's bigger. This isn't a fluke. It's not just one bad employee having a bad night. This is a culture, a way of operating that's been allowed to grow under my nose, and I need to know how deep it runs." Vanessa was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're going back in." It wasn't a question. Naomi's lips curved into a cold smirk. Damn right I am. Vanessa's sharp exhale came through the line. Okay, then we do this the right way. Not as the boss walking in with consequences, not yet. We go undercover. You need to experience this hotel the way the average guest does. No special treatment, no power moves. We dig until we find out just how rotten this place is. Naomi nodded, already calculating. Book me a room under a different name. A premium suite. I want to see if the treatment changes when they think they're dealing with someone with money. I'll handle it, Vanessa said. Name? Naomi thought for a moment before smirking. Nina Adams. Nice touch, Vanessa muttered. I'll text you the details in 10. You sure about this? I built this place, Naomi said, her voice steel. I'm damn sure. Hanging up, she turned to Malcolm. Take me home. I've got some prep to do. The next evening, Naomi returned to the Golden Orchid Hotel, but this time, she wasn't just another guest. She stepped out of the black car, exuding confidence, wealth, and power. Instead of sneakers and jeans, she wore a sleek emerald green dress that hugged her frame elegantly, paired with diamond studs and a designer handbag, nothing too extravagant, just enough to signal money. A pair of sunglasses rested on the bridge of her nose, and her dark curls were styled in a soft updo. She looked like someone who belonged. And the moment she stepped inside, everything changed. The same grand lobby, the same golden chandeliers, the same employees. But now, as her heels clicked against the marble floor, the atmosphere around her shifted. At the front desk, Ethan Reynolds was on duty again. His posture straightened instantly when he saw her. His previous disinterest wiped clean. He didn't recognize her. Instead, he saw what he thought was a wealthy guest, and suddenly he was all smiles. Good evening, Mom, he greeted smoothly. Welcome to the Golden Orchid. How can I assist you? Naomi's stomach tightened, but she kept her face composed. I have a reservation, Nina Adams. Of course, Miss Adams, Ethan said, instantly typing into the system. Within seconds, he was confirming her booking, a stark contrast to the dismissive way he had brushed her off the night before. Your suite is ready for you, Ethan said, smiling. Would you like a welcome drink? I can also arrange for your luggage to be sent up immediately. Naomi accepted a glass of champagne, watching him closely. Where was the hesitation now? The reluctance? The judgment? The only difference between tonight and last night was her appearance. Enjoy your stay, Ethan said, his voice smooth, professional. Naomi didn't reply. She took her key, turned on her heel, and made her way to the elevators, rage simmering beneath the surface. In her suite, a lavish, spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, she dropped her bag on the couch and exhaled. Everything was perfect, pristine. Too perfect. This was the experience guests like her were supposed to have. But what about the ones who weren't draped in designer clothing? The ones who weren't immediately perceived as VIPs? How many others had been brushed aside like she had been the night before? She needed more. Naomi pulled out her phone and dialed Vanessa. Talk to me, Vanessa answered. Check-in was smooth, Naomi said, voice controlled. Too smooth. Ethan went from cold and dismissive last night to falling over himself to accommodate me tonight. Classic, Vanessa muttered. You need to test the other departments. Room service. Housekeeping. The restaurant again. See if the bias is systemic or isolated. Already on it, Naomi said, pacing. And I need you to dig into employee complaints. See if any staff members have reported discrimination. Because if they treat guests like this, I can only imagine how they treat employees who don't fit their image. Vanessa was quiet for a moment before saying, You should also check the financials. Naomi frowned. What do you mean? I did a little digging today, Vanessa said carefully. And I found some discrepancies. Small ones, but weird. Guest charges not adding up. Service fees going missing. Payments rerouted to secondary accounts. Naomi stopped pacing. You think someone's stealing from the hotel? I don't know yet, Vanessa admitted. But if they are, it would explain why they've been so careful about controlling the type of clientele. If you limit guests to only the ones you trust, people who won't question charges, won't look too closely at their bill, you control the game. Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. This was bigger than bad customer service. This was a system. Keep digging, she said. I'll handle the front end. If someone is running a scam inside my hotel, I want to know exactly who it is. She hung up, her pulse steady, her resolve unshaken. This wasn't just about fixing a toxic culture. It wasn't just about firing a few employees. Something deeper was happening inside the Golden Orchid Hotel, and Naomi was going to tear it apart from the inside, no matter what it took. Naomi Carter sat on the edge of the plush king-sized bed in her Golden Orchid Hotel suite, the city lights flickering beyond the vast floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything about the space screamed luxury: the imported silk sheets, the perfectly curated modern decor, the subtle aroma of lavender from the high-end essential oil diffuser humming in the corner. This was what money bought you. This was the experience someone like Nina Adams was meant to have. And yet, just 24 hours ago, she had been treated like she didn't belong here. Same woman, same hotel, a different name, a different appearance, and suddenly she was worthy of respect. The thought churned in her mind like a slow, burning fire. She had already uncovered the first layer of the problem. The staff's bias wasn't accidental, it was ingrained, conditioned. She had seen it unfold in real time: the immediate dismissal when she was dressed casually, the eager smiles when she fit their mold of an acceptable guest. But that wasn't enough. Naomi needed more than just proof of prejudice. She needed to know who was responsible for allowing this to fester, who had set the tone for this culture. Because this wasn't how she built her hotel. Her phone vibrated. "Vanessa, you still awake?" Vanessa asked the moment Naomi picked up. "Wide awake," Naomi muttered, standing and walking toward the minibar. She grabbed a bottle of still water, twisting off the cap as she stared out at the city. "What do you have?" Vanessa let out a slow breath. "I've been combing through old guest complaints and internal HR reports like you asked." "It's worse than we thought, Naomi. Way worse." Naomi turned, brows furrowing. "How bad?" Vanessa hesitated. "Then this isn't just about guests. The staff is being treated differently too. Housekeeping, concierge, even some of the front desk workers. I found at least a dozen internal complaints about discrimination, favoritism, and unethical hiring practices." Naomi's grip on the water bottle tightened. "Who's responsible?" "From what I can tell, a lot of it leads back to Daniel Hayes, your hotel manager." Naomi exhaled sharply, leaning against the window. Of course it's Daniel. She had hired Daniel herself 3 years ago. On paper, he was the perfect candidate: polished, experienced, and well-connected in the industry. But if what Vanessa was uncovering was true, he hadn't just been running a tight ship, he had been curating a very specific kind of clientele and culture. "That's not all," Vanessa continued. "I cross-referenced the financial inconsistencies I found earlier. Some of them are linked directly to guest complaints about unexpected charges, service fees that shouldn't exist, room downgrades that were never explained, refunds that were requested but never processed." Naomi's stomach knotted. So Daniel's not just enabling discrimination. He's running a scam. "Looks that way," Vanessa confirmed. "But there's more. He's not doing it alone." A slow chill crawled up Naomi's spine. "Who?" "I don't have a name yet, but someone on the board is protecting him. That's why none of the complaints have ever resulted in real consequences. That's why your hotel's reputation has stayed clean despite all of this." Vanessa paused. "Someone with power has been making sure these problems don't reach you." Naomi felt a deep, simmering anger settle in her chest. They had been doing this right under her nose. In the business she built, with her name on the damn building. "Then we find out who it is," Naomi said coldly. There was a beat of silence before Vanessa said, "How do you want to handle Daniel?" Naomi's gaze darkened. "I'm not firing him yet. Not until I have everything I need." "You're really going to let him think he's safe?" Naomi's smirk was sharp. "I want him comfortable. I want him to keep making mistakes. I want him to think he's still in control until it's too late." Vanessa let out a low chuckle. "Remind me never to get on your bad side, Carter." "Too late for that," Naomi teased. "Get me a meeting with Daniel. Tomorrow morning." "You got it," Vanessa said before hanging up. Naomi stood there for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the window. She was done being angry, done being stunned. Now it was time to play the game. The next morning, Naomi stepped into the executive boardroom of the Golden Orchid, her expression unreadable. Across from her, Daniel Hayes sat, his usual confident smirk in place. He was in his early 40s, dressed in a meticulously tailored navy suit, his slicked back brown hair giving him a polished, calculated appearance. He was good at his job, too good. Ms. Carter, Daniel greeted smoothly, standing and offering his hand. This is a surprise. Naomi took his hand, squeezing just a little harder than necessary before letting go. I had some time, and I wanted to check in. Daniel gestured for her to sit, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. How was your stay last night? Naomi tilted her head slightly. So he knew. Lovely, she said smoothly, not missing the way his eyes studied her. The staff was wonderful, attentive, accommodating. She sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. Though I had a rather different experience the night before. Daniel blinked, feigning confusion. Oh? Naomi leaned back in her chair. I came in under a different name. No designer dress. No reservation. And suddenly I wasn't welcome. Daniel's expression didn't falter, but Naomi saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes. That's concerning, he said finally, shaking his head. I'll look into it personally. If any of my staff treated you unfairly, I assure you, they'll be dealt with. Naomi let out a small hum. He was good, smooth, rehearsed, but she wasn't here for his polished lies. You know, Naomi said, swirling the coffee in her cup, I've been thinking a lot about our clientele, about how we choose to present this hotel to the world. It's fascinating, isn't it? How perception shapes reality. Daniel smiled, but there was something sharper behind it. Branding is everything in this business, Ms. Carter. That's what I thought, Naomi said, setting her cup down with a quiet clink. Which is why I find it so interesting that certain guests seem to be treated differently than others. There. A slight flicker of tension in his jaw, barely noticeable, but Naomi caught it. I assure you, we treat all our guests with the utmost respect, Daniel said. Naomi smiled. I hope so, because I'm planning to conduct a full review of our operations, guest services, hiring practices, even financial records. If there's anything that needs correcting, I want to make sure we catch it now. Daniel's grip on his pen tightened. Of course, he said smoothly. I'll make sure you have access to anything you need. Liar. Liar. Naomi kept her expression neutral, but inside she was certain of one thing. Daniel was hiding something, and soon she would find out exactly what it was. Naomi Carter walked out of the executive boardroom, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors of the Golden Orchid Hotel. Her conversation with Daniel Hayes had been exactly what she expected: smooth deflections, carefully crafted reassurances, and a calm demeanor that would have fooled anyone who wasn't looking for the cracks. But Naomi was looking, and she had seen them. The slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tightened around his pen, the calculated way he spoke, just enough to seem cooperative while revealing absolutely nothing. He was hiding something, that much was certain. As she stepped into the elevator, she pulled out her phone and dialed Vanessa. Tell me you got something, Naomi said the moment Vanessa picked up. Vanessa exhaled. I'm getting closer. I've been digging through the financials, and I found something interesting. Naomi's pulse quickened. How interesting? The kind that raises all the red flags, Vanessa said. Remember how I told you there were discrepancies in the service fees and refunds? Well, I traced the money trail, and guess what? Some of those funds never actually left the system. They were rerouted. Naomi's grip on the phone tightened. To where? Private accounts. Offshore, Vanessa said. And not just one. Multiple. The transactions are buried under different vendor names, but they all connect back to someone inside the hotel. Someone with the power to authorize these transactions and make sure they don't get flagged. Naomi's stomach knotted. And let me guess, Daniel Hayes has that power. Bingo, Vanessa said. But he's not acting alone. I checked the authorizations. Some of these transactions needed board-level approval. Naomi pressed her back against the elevator wall, closing her eyes for a moment. There it was, the confirmation she had been waiting for. This wasn't just Daniel running a scam behind her back. This was bigger, more dangerous. Someone at the very top was involved, and that meant this was never going to be as simple as firing Daniel. She opened her eyes, stepping off the elevator and striding toward her suite. Do we have a name? Not yet, Vanessa admitted. Whoever's pulling the strings is smart. They're hiding behind layers of approvals and intermediaries, but I'll find them. Naomi tossed her keycard onto the table as she entered her suite. Start with the board members. Find out who's been working closely with Daniel, who's been signing off on key decisions. I'm on it, Vanessa said. And Naomi, be careful. If Daniel and this mystery board member realize you're onto them, they won't just sit back and let you take them down. Naomi smirked, staring out at the city skyline. Good. Let them come. I want them to think they still have control. Hanging up, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had come to this hotel thinking she would expose bias and discrimination. Instead, she had uncovered a deep-rooted conspiracy of fraud and corruption. And now she was going to burn it all down. That evening, Naomi decided to test the waters again. She dressed in an elegant but understated outfit, a tailored black dress, simple jewelry, nothing flashy but still exuding quiet wealth. She wanted to see if the service disparities extended beyond the front desk. Her first stop was room service. She picked up the phone and ordered a simple meal, a grilled salmon with asparagus and a glass of white wine. How long will that take? She asked. 30 minutes, Ms. Adams, the voice on the other end said cheerfully. Naomi nodded to herself. Exactly on time. She made another call, this time to Vanessa. Room service test. 30 minutes, she said. Noted, Vanessa replied. You want me to place the same order as a regular guest? Do it, Naomi confirmed. Same meal, same request. But make sure it's coming from a guest that doesn't fit their usual preferred clientele. Consider it done, Vanessa said. Naomi waited. Exactly 30 minutes later, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find a well-groomed server in a crisp uniform standing outside with a tray, a polite smile on his face. Your meal, Ms. Adams, he said smoothly, placing it on the table. Would you like anything else? No, thank you, Naomi said, tipping him generously. The server nodded, backing away. Efficient, professional, prompt. Exactly how it should be. Now, she waited for Vanessa's report. 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Naomi, Vanessa said, voice tight with frustration. Same order. Different guest. It took over an hour. Naomi closed her eyes, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. And the service? Dismissive, Vanessa said. The server barely made eye contact, didn't apologize for the delay, and when the guest asked about the wait time, they got an excuse about kitchen backup even though your order was on time. Naomi let out a slow breath. There it was. Again, a pattern. A system. Certain guests were prioritized. Others were treated as afterthoughts. Add it to the file, Naomi said. I want every inconsistency documented, every bias, every delay. I want proof that no one can argue with. You got it, Vanessa said. Naomi hung up and poured herself a glass of wine, staring at the city beyond her window. She had enough now. Enough to know this wasn't just bad employees or isolated incidents. This was a carefully constructed culture of exclusion, one that benefited a very specific type of guest and dismissed everyone else. And Daniel wasn't just part of it. He was enforcing it. But she wasn't done yet. She needed one more thing, something that would expose not just the discrimination but the corruption at its core. The next morning, Naomi made her way down to the employee break room. She had requested a private meeting with Miguel Alvarez, a longtime housekeeping supervisor. He had worked at the hotel for 5 years, and from what Vanessa had found, he had witnessed more than most. Miguel was nervous when she arrived, shifting on his feet. Miss Carter, Please, Naomi interrupted gently, offering him a reassuring smile. Just Naomi. Miguel swallowed, nodding. I don't want to lose my job, he admitted, voice low. You won't, Naomi promised. But I need the truth. What have you seen? Miguel hesitated, glancing toward the door, then back at her. Then, finally, he exhaled. I've seen the way they treat some guests different than others, he admitted. Housekeeping gets quiet orders sometimes. Some rooms were told to go above and beyond. Special amenities, extra attention. But others? He shook his head. We're told to keep it minimal. Naomi's jaw clenched. Who gives those orders? Miguel licked his lips, hesitating. Mr. Hayes. But sometimes it's bigger than him. I've seen names on internal memos, high-level guests marked as priority while others are, let's just say, not. Naomi's stomach dropped. What names? Miguel hesitated, then finally whispered Mr. Vaughn. Naomi's breath caught. Richard Vaughn, a senior board member, a man with power, a man she had trusted. She forced her voice to stay steady. Are you sure? Miguel nodded. I've seen his name more than once, and I've heard rumors that he's the one protecting Mr. Hayes. Naomi sat back, exhaling. There it was. The missing piece. Daniel wasn't just enforcing this toxic system. He was following orders. And Richard Vaughn. He was the one pulling the strings. Naomi Carter sat motionless, her mind processing what Miguel Alvarez had just told her. Richard Vaughn. A name she had never expected to hear. A name that carried weight in the corporate world, that exuded power, prestige, and untouchability. Vaughn wasn't just a board member. He was the board member. One of the oldest and most respected figures in the Golden Orchid's history. A man with decades of experience in the hospitality industry. A man who had been instrumental in helping secure investors when she first took control of the hotel. And now, he was the one orchestrating a culture of exclusion, corruption, and theft right under her nose. Naomi kept her expression composed, though her pulse hammered beneath the surface. She couldn't let Miguel see the fury simmering inside her. This wasn't just about staff bias anymore. This was about systematic discrimination. About financial fraud at the highest level. About a man who thought he was above consequences. She leaned forward, voice calm but firm. Miguel, I need you to be completely honest with me. You said you've seen Vaughn's name on internal memos. Do you have access to any of those documents? Miguel hesitated, glancing toward the break room door as if expecting someone to burst in and drag him away for speaking. His fingers twisted together, the weight of years of silence pressing down on him. Finally, he nodded. I don't have them, but I know where you can find them. Naomi's breath slowed. Where? In Mr. Hayes' office, Miguel murmured. He keeps records, hard copies of some internal communications. I've seen them when I clean his office. Some of them have Vaughn's name on them. Financial statements, guest reports, special service lists. He doesn't trust everything to the hotel system, so he prints them out and keeps them locked in a filing cabinet. Naomi's mind sharpened. Daniel Hayes was a meticulous man, always covering his tracks, but if he had physical records, he had made a mistake. A mistake she could use. Thank you, Miguel, Naomi said sincerely, placing a reassuring hand on his. I know this isn't easy, but you've done the right thing. Miguel swallowed. If anyone finds out I told you. They won't, Naomi assured him. But if they do, I promise you, I will protect you. No one is losing their job for telling the truth. Miguel nodded, standing quickly, his eyes darting to the clock. His break was nearly over. Be careful, Ms. Carter. If Vaughn's really behind this, he's dangerous. Naomi watched him go, his words lingering. She wasn't just taking down a corrupt manager anymore. She was going after a man who had spent his entire career ensuring he was untouchable. Good. She was going to tear his empire down from the inside. Later that night, Naomi slipped into the executive wing of the hotel, her heart steady, her movements precise. Daniel Hayes' office was on the 12th floor, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling glass windows and minimalist furniture. She knew the security systems inside and out. She had installed them. She also knew that Hayes often left the building by 7 p.m., trusting that the night staff had no reason to enter his office after hours. A mistake. Naomi walked briskly down the hallway, her heels muffled by the plush carpeting. She was dressed simply black slacks, a fitted blazer, gloves covering her hands. If anyone saw her, she had an excuse ready. She was the owner. She could be anywhere she damn well pleased. Reaching his office door, she pulled out the master keycard she had acquired earlier that day. The red light on the lock blinked once, then turned green. The door clicked open. She stepped inside. The office was immaculate, just as she expected. Daniel's obsessive need for control manifested in its pristine condition. A sleek black desk sat at the center of the room, flanked by neatly arranged bookshelves. A glass wall overlooked the city skyline, and to the right, the filing cabinet Miguel had mentioned. Naomi walked straight to it, pulling the top drawer. Locked. Of course. She pulled out a thin metal tool from her pocket, a simple pick. Daniel was careful, but he wasn't an expert at security. She was. A few precise movements. A soft click. The drawer slid open. Inside, she found folders stacked in precise order, color-coded by department. Naomi's fingers skimmed over them, looking for financial records, guest treatment policies, anything that might lead back to Vaughn. Then she saw it. A folder labeled Restricted, Executive Approval Only. Bingo. She pulled it out, flipping through the documents. Financial transactions. Employee directives. Special guest reports. And then, at the very bottom of the stack, a letter. A direct email printout from Richard Vaughn to Daniel Hayes. Naomi's pulse slowed as she read. Daniel, ensure that our preferred guests continue receiving priority accommodations. I don't want to see complaints from them about being treated like regulars. We have an image to maintain. Keep the undesirable bookings at a minimum, especially in the premium suites. I trust you understand what I mean. Additionally, I'll expect the usual adjustments to our financials before the quarterly report is reviewed. Keep this discreet. RV. There it was. The proof. The Golden Orchid Hotel's exclusionary policies weren't just about discrimination, they were about profit manipulation. Vaughn and Hayes had been curating their guest list, ensuring that the wrong kind of clientele wasn't occupying high-end spaces while simultaneously doctoring financial records to siphon money into private accounts. Naomi's grip tightened on the paper. This was everything she needed. A sudden sound from the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Quickly, she slid the documents into her blazer and shut the drawer, stepping back just as the office door creaked open. She turned, keeping her expression neutral as she locked eyes with Daniel Hayes. His face flickered with momentary surprise, but he recovered fast, stepping inside and shutting the door behind him. Naomi, he said smoothly, hands in his pockets. What a surprise. Working late. Naomi smiled, slow and deliberate. You could say that. Daniel studied her for a moment, then his eyes flicked toward the filing cabinet. Sharp. Calculating. You know, he mused, stepping forward, I've been hearing some interesting things lately. Staff whispering, guests asking questions. A certain change in energy around the hotel. He smiled, but it was cold. And I can't help but wonder, are you looking for something, Naomi? Naomi tilted her head, stepping toward him. Maybe I already found it. Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. Careful, he murmured. You don't want to start a war you can't win. Naomi's smirk was razor sharp. Daniel, sweetheart, I never start wars. She stepped past him, brushing his shoulder as she moved toward the door. I finish them. And with that she walked out, Vaughn's incriminating email burning in her pocket like a loaded gun. The game had changed. Now, it was her move. Naomi Carter walked out of Daniel Hayes' office, her pulse steady but her mind racing. She had the proof. The letter from Richard Vaughn was a direct admission of guest discrimination and financial fraud. Now, it wasn't just about unfair treatment, it was about a criminal enterprise running under her name. As she stepped into the elevator, she kept her expression neutral, but inside she was already planning her next move. Vaughn and Hayes thought they were untouchable. Thought they had manipulated the system so well that no one would ever find out. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated her. The elevator doors slid open, and Naomi stepped into the dimly lit hallway of her suite. She slipped inside, locking the door behind her before pulling out the stolen letter. Under normal circumstances, she would have taken a moment to absorb the weight of it, to let herself fully acknowledge the betrayal, but there was no time for that. She dialed Vanessa. The call barely rang before Vanessa picked up. Tell me you found something. Oh, I found everything, Naomi said, pacing the room. Vaughn's behind it. I have a letter, a direct email, printed and filed away in Daniel's office where he orders guest prioritization and financial manipulation. He's been filtering money out of the hotel for years, covering it up with fraudulent reports, all while ensuring only certain guests get the full luxury experience. There was silence for a second before Vanessa exhaled. You got him. I got them both, Naomi corrected. Daniel's been his loyal lapdog, running the operation on the ground. But Vaughn, he's the kingpin. He's been orchestrating this for years, using the board's trust to keep himself untouchable. If I expose this, I don't just take down Daniel, I take Vaughn with him. You're not thinking of going to the board first, are you? Vanessa asked. Naomi smirked. Hell no. I'm not walking into a boardroom full of men who've been under Vaughn's thumb for years, expecting them to suddenly grow a conscience. I need to control the narrative before they can bury it. Vanessa's voice turned sharp. Then we go public. Not just yet, Naomi said, grabbing a pen and notepad, already outlining her plan. First, I want to watch them squirm. I want Vaughn to know he's losing before he's even lost. I want to see Daniel crack under pressure. Then, when they realize there's no way out, I drop the hammer. Vanessa chuckled. You are a terrifying woman, Naomi Carter. Naomi grinned. You're just figuring that out now? The next morning, Naomi walked into the Golden Orchid's conference room, where the monthly executive meeting was already underway. The long mahogany table was surrounded by the hotel's senior staff, including Daniel, who sat to the right of Vaughn, his expression carefully controlled. Vaughn, as always, looked completely composed, his silver hair perfectly styled, his navy suit tailored to perfection, his presence demanding authority. Naomi took her seat at the head of the table, placing a thick folder in front of her. Before we begin, she said smoothly, I have a few concerns that need to be addressed. Vaughn folded his hands together. Of course, Naomi. What's on your mind? She slid the folder across the table. This. Vaughn arched an eyebrow, opening the folder. The moment his eyes landed on the printed email, his fingers stiffened. Naomi didn't miss the way his jaw tightened ever so slightly, the way his gaze flickered toward Daniel, who sat frozen, his Adam's apple bobbing. These are records I found in Daniel's office, Naomi continued, keeping her tone even. Documents detailing discriminatory guest practices, fraudulent financial reports, and unauthorized transactions. And most interestingly, an email from you, Richard. The room went dead silent. Daniel's face paled, his hands curling into fists beneath the table. Vaughn, to his credit, maintained his composure, but Naomi saw the subtle shift in his posture, a man who had been caught but was still calculating his next move. This is a misunderstanding, Vaughn said smoothly, setting the papers down. These are internal communications taken out of context. Oh please, Naomi cut in, her voice sharp. Do not insult my intelligence, Richard. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a deliberate, orchestrated operation to control the clientele, finances, and public image of my hotel. She leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. And you used my name to do it. Across the table, Daniel shifted in his seat. His gaze darted between Naomi and Vaughn, sweat forming at his temple. He was unraveling. Naomi turned to him. Daniel, I assume you'd like to explain why I found confidential board-level approvals in your office. Daniel swallowed, glancing at Vaughn as if searching for guidance. Vaughn, however, remained silent, his gaze cold. There it was. The moment loyalty turned to survival. Daniel wet his lips, his voice cracking slightly. I was following orders. Whose orders? Naomi asked, though she already knew the answer. Daniel hesitated, then finally said Vaughn's. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Vaughn's eyes darkened. Careful, Daniel. Naomi smirked. No, let him talk. She gestured for Daniel to continue. He told me to filter out certain guests, Daniel said quickly, to make sure high-value clients got priority treatment. He controlled financial reports, made sure refunds and complaints never reached your desk. That's enough, Vaughn snapped, his voice sharp. Naomi tilted her head. Enough. I think we're just getting started. Vaughn exhaled slowly, regaining his composure. This is ridiculous. You're taking the word of a desperate man over decades of my loyalty to this company. Do you really think the board will take your side in this? Naomi smiled. Who said I need the board's approval? She pulled out her phone, turning the screen to face him. A live streaming feed was already playing. Vaughn's face paled. You know, Richard, Naomi said sweetly, you really should check for hidden cameras before you start confessing to fraud. The conference room erupted into chaos. Board members scrambled for their phones. Media outlets were already reporting. Naomi had sent the evidence to journalists before she walked into the meeting. There was no covering it up. No spinning the story. The truth was already out. Vaughn stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You have no idea what you've done. Naomi rose as well, stepping toward him. "Oh, I know exactly what I've done," she said, her voice low, lethal. "I took back my hotel." Security entered the room moments later, placing Vaughn and Daniel under escort. Their reign was over. As Vaughn was led away, he turned back to Naomi one last time, his face unreadable. "You think you've won?" Naomi smirked. No, Richard, she had won. Weeks later, the Golden Orchid Hotel was transformed. New policies were in place. A complete restructuring of leadership had begun. Naomi personally ensured that staff members like Miguel were rewarded for their honesty, that every guest received the respect they deserved. She stood in the lobby, watching as guests of all backgrounds checked in, their experiences finally equal. Vanessa walked up beside her. "So, what's next?" Naomi smiled, watching her hotel become everything she had always envisioned. "Now," she said, exhaling. "Now we built something better. And this time no one would stand in her way." Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.